changes spanning generations, or a shift in the wind, a body dormant underground. This world is right.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching tonight. And for those of you who listen to this when I publish it as a podcast a few weeks from now, welcome. Welcome to everybody that's here. Normally I go live on Wednesday nights, but I got a special guest tonight, Barry Magliaditi, and I'm looking forward to talking with him. You know, one day I'm checking my email and I had this email in my box. It said, "Hi, Emily, straight to it. I'm working with an author, and I thought that it would make an amazing guest on the Onward podcast and wanted to run the idea by you. Barry was a self-proclaimed absolute mess, but you would never guess that." And I'm going to bring Barry in as I read this. This is the email I got, Barry. Barry was a self-proclaimed absolute mess, but you'd never guess that. To the outside world, he was a successful entrepreneur who mentored thousands of business owners and scaled hundreds of businesses to 7 figures. But really, every area of Barry's life was circling the drain. Drug use, depression, he felt completely worthless and alone until he analyzed the relationship he had with himself. As an entrepreneur, you're no stranger to the grind it takes to launch your business, and sometimes that hustle can turn into living a life that you don't recognize, like it did for Barry. Years ago, Barry started healing his relationship with himself through self-love and being guided through his intuition. And with each practice, his happiness and success expanded. His new best-selling book, Sex, Drugs, and Radical Self-Expression, is a must-read for entrepreneurs on how to practice self-care and, by doing so, to have a flourishing life and business. I think your listeners would appreciate a conversation between you two. Can we look at getting Barry on the show? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. We can. I'm looking forward to hearing Barry's story, and welcome, Barry.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Emily.
Yeah, so we've got a few people here that are watching the show, so I just like to welcome them. Kenny D says, "Savor the flavor of the awesomeness in you peeps." Thanks, Kenny. And Tim Sowen is here. He says he's looking forward to another great show. And Don Jett is saying, great potential, the potential of our heart. She's excited about that title. And Kenny says, self-love is so very important. And why is it that it takes so long for some of us to find it, Barry? Do you know?
That's a fantastic question. I think we live very much in a world that focuses on immediate gratification and consumption, you know, and I don't know about you, but for me, I kind of grew up in an environment, and it wasn't necessarily from my parents, but just the environment that I was in, the communities I was in, that was focused on needing to achieve. And it was many years down the path of, I guess, chasing the next thing and the next thing, the next thing, that I realized what I was actually looking to achieve wasn't the thing. Wasn't the materialistic gains. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the car. It wasn't even the relationship and the kids and the white picket fence. It was a feeling of belonging and a feeling of being worthy. And, you know, yeah, we can stem that back to experiences we had growing up. But for me, I felt that it was even older than that it existed long before I even, I guess, incarnated into this meat suit, into this life we call now. So I guess for me, my feeling is that it's come from a need for us to belong.
Yeah. And you said you felt like it happened even, you were that way even before you incarnated. But, I just spent the weekend with my 5-year-old grandson. 5. That's an awesome
Mm,
age because you love yourself.
mm,
He does. You love life. And just seeing life through his eyes is
mm,
awesome. And that's how we're all meant to be, right? But somehow along the way, we lose that.
mm. Yeah, the question I'd had is, does he love himself?
Yeah, I
Or
hope
is
so.
he experiencing life in the moment? Is he
Yes,
experiencing this lightheartedness, this wonderment, this joy for even the smallest of things that to us adults are no longer stimulating?
I know. Yeah. I hope he loves himself. It's just going to be curious to observe as he gets older how, he reacts to things and how he changes and stuff like that. And you have 2 kids, what, 10 and what'd you say?
12.
12. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, let's see, you've got a book out, and I'm going to put the title of it up here. Um, I've got it. I'm not done reading it yet, but it's Sex, Drugs, and Radical Self-Expression, The Unexpected Path to Fulfillment. And I think one of the things you learned on your unexpected path was the importance, the value, what you get out of tapping into the potential of your heart.
Mm.
Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess for me, my relationship with my heart started about 15 or 16 years ago. Um, I had an interesting experience at work where I fell over and injured myself, and to the specialist, they couldn't really quite diagnose what this injury was with my back or how it had happened. And I remember having a conversation with a friend's father just after that experience, and he said, these big experiences happen to us in life as awakenings when we're not listening to the guidance, or we're not listening to the whispers of the universe. And this was quite foreign for me. I grew up in a Christian family, and earlier on we went to church for Christmas and for Easter and things like that. I wouldn't say that we were heavily religious, but there was definitely an influence within our family environment. And for me, something just never quite felt right. There was parts of that whole process that felt right, and there was just other parts that didn't quite feel right.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I kind of grew up in life to some degree atheist, that I only believed what I could physically experience myself. And it wasn't that I was anti-religion or anti-God or anything else like that. It was just, for me, I was very black and white. And when he shared this with me, there was almost like a remembrance, almost this feeling that opened up inside of me that connected me to something that I felt I'd been looking for. And I guess that was the start of you could say, my spiritual journey. It's probably 18 years ago now, I guess, and eventually led me to a practice that I speak about in the book. I went through many different processes and practices, and eventually led me to a practice where I started to connect with my heart, my spiritual heart, and through my spiritual heart to spirit, to source, to divinity, I guess you could say. And really helped me to start to tap into this deep space of intuition that I now know all of us have. And, if we go back to your grandson, the one really beautiful thing that we notice when we observe small children is that they have this intrinsic ability of knowing. They have that sixth sense, they have that intuition already, and they know things that they haven't necessarily even been around long enough to have been taught. Yet the fundamental flaw that I've seen up until this point is that nowhere in our schooling system, and for a lot of parents, were we ever taught how to tap into our intuition. We were told to develop our brain, our logic, and to make decisions based on the brain. And the fundamental flaw with that is a lot of those decisions are based on past experiences. But if we've always had negative experiences, let's just say in a relationship, we've been with men or women that have always done the wrong thing by us, we've then started to create this conditioning that allows us to believe that that is all that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And yet intuition has the ability to guide us into the unknowing, in a safe way, in a way that we can trust something far beyond our known past experiences.
Yeah. And it sounds like you were like me, like I used to be, achieve, 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 right? And when you do that, you don't tap into your heart because feelings kind of get in the way of checking all those things off the box, and you're in your thinking brain, your head all the time, right? And so how did you learn to like slow down and really like tap into your intuition? How did you do that? Tap into your heart?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like for me, it took me many years of, I guess, undoing past conditioning.
Yeah.
Because I did grow up heavily influenced by my brain and my brain's ability to make decisions. I remember growing up, my parents saying things to me like, "Oh, you've got to stop and think before you act," and yet I would still continue to act like just so fast and not even be able to stop and process. And I guess later in life, and I talk about this in the book, we talk about the brain and the psychology, is that I was reacting back then from my creature neurology. And the creature neurology, or that critter brain, has two functions. One is to survive and two is to reproduce, right? So a lot of the things that I was doing when I was younger that I wasn't thinking about, I was doing based on this instinct or this reaction to keep myself safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the heart was something that I guess once I started having these crazy experiences that I couldn't physically explain and I couldn't find answers for on the internet, it caused me to stop and start asking myself different questions. And through the different questions that I started asking myself, I started to access different parts of my consciousness. And when I started to access different parts of my consciousness, I started to pay attention to a voice inside of me. And I'll never forget, Emily, like my first day of, I went to do this neuro-linguistic program training at the Coaching Institute in Melbourne. And I'll never forget the first day, the teacher started talking about the voices in your head. And for me, it felt like such a relief because I'd been walking around for years thinking that I should be locked up in some mental asylum because I had these different voices. Now, although all those different voices are not your heart, right? They are different aspects of the human consciousness. There is a voice, or there is a whisper, or I would say even more, there's a knowing that is that guidance from your intuition, that is that guidance from your heart. But the difference to the voices is it's very soft. It's a whisper.
It's not beating you up, right?
No. And the beautiful thing is, though, is the more that you can slow down and start to listen to that, and to not even just listen to it, to actually take action and follow it, the more present and pronounced that relationship, that connection starts to become alive. It's like going to the gym. I often share it with, similar to training muscles, is that you go to the gym and you want the six-pack abs and you want the rock hard biceps, and the first few times you go, it's a struggle and it hurts. But the reason that you go back is not because of the pain or even for the workout. You go back because you want the results. And the more that you go back and the more that you train, the easier it becomes. And then it starts to become part of second nature. It just starts to become part of who you are. Well, us being able to be trained to use our heart is exactly the same way. The first few times it might hurt because we start to follow the heart. And what has to happen is some of the stuff that we've built around our life to keep us safe has to be renovated, has to be decommissioned, has to be, I guess, broken down for us to access the purity of living life from a space of intuition. And sometimes in the beginning that can hurt, and we can question our heart. We can question that guidance to be like, oh, but I followed my heart and she broke up with me. And it's years later you realize, you know what, that was the best thing that happened to me. That was divinity in play. That was my intuition leading me to the life that I'm living right now. But you know what? I couldn't see it back then because the goggles that I was wearing were based on achievement, were based on needing to belong to this false constraint of reality that is not reality.
Yeah, for sure. So the technology is awesome. You just froze up a little bit, but look, you're in Bali, right? And I'm in Virginia. This is amazing. This is so cool. So for the people that are watching, if you have any questions for me or my guest, please, post them, and I'll make sure that make sure that Barry sees it and that we get to the question. So when you said something earlier about these things kept happening to me that kind of made you more aware of that inner voice. What are these things? I mean, you mentioned one, that injury that people couldn't say what it was, but
yeah, there was a few, and I'm cautious to share too many because everyone's journey is different. And that was a beautiful thing. When I look back now, the way that I was guided to learn to start to use my heart and activate that part of consciousness was exactly perfect for me and what I needed to be open to it. And I see friends and people that I speak to these days, and I see it happening more frequently to people that aren't even necessarily searching for it and not necessarily going through the same journey that I did. But for me, there were certain experiences. I remember I broke up with probably my first real girlfriend, and I was guided to go into the city. I was living in Launceston, Tasmania at that point. It's a little heart-shaped island below Australia. And I was guided to go into the city, and I had no idea why I was guided to go in there. And I went in there and ended up getting led to this shop, Bacana, which was one of those, old age spiritual shops with the incense and the, tie-dyed pants and things like that. And I was actually led to buy these Archangel Oracle cards at the time. And I was pretty down and out. I was struggling to understand the meaning of life. I just broke it up with this girl who I thought I loved and was going to marry. And, I was super young. I was 16, 17 years old back then. I didn't know what love was, but I guess for where I was at that point in time, it was a big deal. And, I remembered that I started to draw on these cards, and they always gave me the exact answer that I needed. But the funny thing was that the answers they gave me aligned with my then beliefs of divinity. Because about a year before that, I'd met this guy who I spoke about in the book, Josh, and that was his father that shared that insight about us hurting ourselves or having these incidences when we're not listening, these big incidences. But I went on in pain for months with my back. I was told I'd never work properly again. I was seeing a specialist every other week and was still experiencing excruciating pain. And I remember one night, my friend Josh said, "Give me a hand." I was like, "What do you mean, give me a hand?" And I reached out and gave him my hand, and he went to shake my hand. And I explained the book as being like the best orgasm you've ever felt in your life times about 10, just coming through my arm into my heart just opening up.
He was doing Reiki, right? Reiki.
Yeah. And I was like, "What the hell was that?" And he's like, "It's Reiki." And I was like, "What's Reiki?" And he's like, "It's just this thing I've always remembered how to do." And the interesting thing is he never went to a course or saw a teacher or read a book. He just was born with a remembrance of how to channel energy. And that was the start of my healing journey for my back, but it was also the start of me opening up to a state of spiritual consciousness. And for me, being able to start to channel energy and to gain insights, I'd be in rooms with people and have these insights come through, and I'd be like, "Excuse me, this might sound really random, but blah, 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 blah." And they'd be like, "How the hell do you know that?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just get these messages sometimes." And this was at 16, 17, 18 years old. And back then it felt like a bit of a curse, because I was feeling all these feelings and emotions that weren't my own, but that was my journey to start to, I guess, be awoken to this work and to access my heart. And again, it's not everybody's journey, but that was how it started for me.
Yeah. So tell us about your companies, because I mean, you became financially independent, at 35, right?
Yeah, even earlier. Yeah.
Even earlier. Didn't go to college and started, an entrepreneur. And how did that happen?
I guess similar, same way. I went through high school. I never quite felt like I fit in or belonged. Never had a huge circle of friends, and yet I was always enjoyed building things with my hands from a very, very young age. I remember getting my first toolbox, pretty much as soon as I could stand up, and I always enjoyed building things. And so I left school and went straight into apprenticeship. It's like I knew what I wanted to do. I was lucky enough that I knew what I wanted to do. Yet the job that I landed wasn't the perfect job, but it was still in the same kind of industry. So I thought, look, I'll get in there and show them what I can do and just kind of work my way up. And I got in there, I started doing my trade, and sure enough, attracted situations where I wasn't being treated very well. And there's this common kind of theme that I had through my life. I was in situations where, you know, the boss of that company put me in charge of an area of people that had been there for 30 years. And that didn't sit very well, especially in the trades industry.
Right.
Amongst a bunch of blokes, you know. And so anyway, I went from job after job. I kind of finished my apprenticeship as quick as I could and left in search of finding somewhere where I belonged. And I went to another one. And then eventually I landed myself with this boss who, after working for him for 12 months in quite an abusive relationship, rang me up and yelled down the phone. I could almost feel the spits of water coming out of his mouth through the phone. And basically told me I'd never amount to anything, that I was stupid, that I'd forgotten to load the truck with this particular part for a job, which I didn't even load the truck, he did. And I felt this overwhelming feeling. It's like, get out of here, like go. And so I waited till he got back the next day from the job. And I said, look, I've got to go. Like, this is not a place for me. I'm not going to be a boy that you continue to spit abuse to every time something doesn't go right. Had no idea what I was doing, where I was going. And it was 3 weeks later, I was at my mum's house. So I said, Mum, I'm worried that I'm not worried. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, I worry about everything. You know that I do. And this is the first time in my life I feel really content and safe. And she's like, you'll work it out. You always do. You always land on your feet. And it was the next day that I decided to publish an ad in a paper for a local handyman, no job too big or small. And that was the start of my first business. You know, I was 18 years old. I had a home that I'd bought. I had debt. I had no savings. I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going. And that business ended up becoming a multi-million-dollar entity. I employed 14, 15 odd staff with a bunch of subcontractors, zero marketing spend, just on doing a good job. But that same pattern in me of needing to belong and fit in was what allowed that company to hit a certain amount of success. Because I wanted to make sure that every customer was happy, every customer liked me, every employee was happy, every employee liked me. But that also became the Achilles heel that eventually became bankruptcy for 1.3 million, because I'd grown an organization that was a multi-million-dollar job, a prison cell, where all the staff, all the clients, all relied on having to communicate with me directly. There wasn't teams set up, there wasn't systems set up, there was nothing like that set up, because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. But one thing you said earlier you said, I kept attracting jobs where I wasn't treated right or whatever. Why did you word it that way? That you were attracting instead of that was happening to you?
At the time, my language would have been very much like, why does this keep happening to me?
Yes.
Right. Uh-huh. And I guess now with hindsight and experience of life and everything I've been through with the different modalities and the different healing processes, is that, you know, what I know to be true is that, you know, very much we're like a projector screen, and life is the screen. We are the projector, life is the screen, and we never see life as life is. We see life as we are through our projection. And, you know, how many of you can relate? And I'd love to see in the comments where you've been in environments where the same things happen to you and somebody else, you know, and they have a completely different outlook on that situation to what you do.
Yeah.
Right. You might also have friends or family members that you find always fall on their feet, or always attract luck, you know, great situations. The reality is that I had something inside of me, whether it was from my upbringing, whether it was something that came through when I incarnated this life, that was attracting these shitty situations where I would get verbally and physically abused. And I wouldn't fit in. I wouldn't feel like I belonged. And I used to get told a lot when I was younger that I was an old soul, and never quite knew what that meant, but wondered why a lot of my friends or people that I got along with were older than me. Uh-huh. And I guess it wasn't until I started doing the work that I realized that through me healing, that experience, or those experiences I was having, allowed me to have insight and, I guess, medicine to help others. You know, and that was what I started to realize, is that I had all these different experiences, you know, the bankruptcy, the being cheated on by most women that I was in relationships with, like everything I speak about in the book actually became the greatest blessing and the greatest opportunity for me to have the life that I have right now. Like I couldn't have 7 companies right now had I not have been bankrupt and not have learnt some pretty harsh lessons and realities around how business works and doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I guess the difference is, Emily, is that I didn't take that and be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not a business owner. I guess I'm not worthy of this. I guess, I shouldn't have relationships. I guess women are always going to cheat on me. Like I chose to go like, why is this happening? Like, how does this keep happening?
You got curious and you looked at yourself. Because like one of my coaches said, when we point our finger at somebody or at a situation, we have 3 pointing back at us. So you went and looked at yourself because you're the projector of your life. So we got a question here. Let's see, a Facebook user said, any suggestions for individuals headed into a major life transition, such as retirement, and then seeking a more entrepreneurial experience in their post-retirement life and adding those elements of consciousness to become successful? Let me see. Okay, successful in a satisfying way, not necessarily materially.
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting question. My father's just come up for retirement recently from a job he's been in for 30 years. And my suggestion and advice for him is that before he retired, that he starts to look at what's the next step. Now, the challenge that we can have when we go through a major life transition like this is that we have a big part of our identity that is identified with who we were in that role. Now, this is exactly the same conversation I have with entrepreneurs who are looking to exit their company, is that they need to recreate their sense of self, their sense of identity and who they are beyond that company before they exit. Otherwise, what happens is as they go through the process of exiting, they have the systems, the process, the teams in place, but they energetically attract and create sabotage to prove to themselves that they're needed in their company. So one thing that I want to share about this listener is that there's a great level of self-awareness, because what they're wanting is an entrepreneurial journey, but what they're actually wanting is the satisfaction of that entrepreneurial journey. So the one thing that I would share is be clear on what the outcome is. Right? Is the outcome making $1 million and being able to have a business that works without you? Or is the outcome allowing yourself to be stretched in this new way, in this new adventure? Because the way that you tackle what's ahead of you is going to be very different if you're trying to reach an outcome of materialistic gain versus I'm here to enjoy every single day. And the funny thing is the entrepreneurs that find a way to enjoy the challenges of entrepreneurship are the ones that actually become more successful than the ones that are chasing a high company valuation.
For sure. I get it. Like, yeah, I've been through that a little bit. I mean, I retired and I was a senior executive with the Navy. I was the equivalent of a 2-star admiral in 2019. Now I'm a coach. I'm not Emily, the senior executive. And that senior executive isn't really shouldn't define me, right? That's not my worth. I'm not worthy because I held that job. I'm worthy because I'm Emily, because I'm me. You're not worthy because you own 7 companies. You're worthy because you're Barry. But it's not something that for somebody who's been achieving to come upon like that. It takes doing work on yourself. Yeah. They said, thanks for the great insights. Hi, Russ. Thanks for joining us. If you guys have any questions for me or Barry, post them. So, all right. So we say sex, drugs, and radical self-expression. That was your unexpected path to fulfillment. Tell us about the drugs.
Yeah, the drugs are listed in there from 2 different points and perspectives. You know, back when I was younger, it was, you know, addictions to marijuana and, you know, party pills and things like that. And very much it was an unconscious attempt to escape all the stuff that I wasn't dealing with, didn't know I needed to deal with, was unprepared to deal with, whatever the case may be. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of spiritual insight per se back then. It was more so just numbing the experience of life. And weed in many ways helped me to kind of interact with life as life was, because I was so highly strung and very much lived in a state of fight or flight. So like I couldn't have a present conversation with someone because my eyes were always darting all over the place. My speech was going 3 or 4 times the normal speed of anyone else's, and weed allowed me to kind of just be on the level with people. And, you know, I went through and did a lot of healing around those different addictions and was drug-free for many, many years. And then more recently, I started to have experience with plant-based medicines. You know, my intuition led me to experiment with psilocybin and mescaline and ayahuasca and DMT and different things like that. And through those experiences, I started to gain, I guess, even deeper and even different insights into life, into myself, into what I was doing here. And again, I very much state in the book that my journey doesn't necessarily have to be your journey. You know, you don't necessarily have to go and have an experience with DMT or psilocybin to get insights or to connect in with your intuition. Yet I do know that it's becoming more and more popular, especially amongst, you know, A-grade CEOs and so forth like that, to gain deeper wisdom and insights when they've been in these corporate careers their whole life, and all of a sudden they just don't feel the same anymore. They just don't have the same meaning. And I guess, you know, the world, Earth, has a lot of potent medicine for us to be able to gain ancient wisdom from, if we're open to receiving that.
Yeah. Awesome. I haven't tried any of that. Like I told you earlier, I got to get my son to listen to this episode, because I see a lot of you guys have a similar journey for sure, from when you were growing up and how you were feeling. And as a mom, like, how did your mom deal with that? Because as a mom, it's really hard to see your son or child not feeling like they fit in or turning to drugs to feel good.
Yeah, look, I guess I want to preface that, you know, like I grew up in a very loving family. I'm blessed that my parents are still together and still both alive to this day. And, you know, me and mum have had a lot of conversations, because it was quite challenging, I think, for her and dad when I started entering this space of personal development, and, you know, more so started coaching and sharing things online and writing books and being interviewed. And, you know, naturally there was a part that come up inside of them that was worried about what people might think, you know, as parents, because as parents, you do the best that you can. And even myself, with the knowledge that I've had around personal development, I know I'm still making mistakes with my kids. I still know that they're going to grow up and wish that things were different, or wish that I was different. It's just part of life. And I guess, you know, what I shared with mum is that it was because of those experiences that allowed me to be who I am today. Mm-hmm. You know, let's not focus on the past. Let's not focus on our perception of what childhood was or wasn't like for you or for me or for my siblings, but let's focus on where we're at now and what we've been able to achieve as a result of that past history. But yeah, it was difficult to mum. Like, I remember my last year of high school, it was a battle for my mum to get me to school every day. Like, I just didn't want to be there. And she somehow found new and magical ways every day to manipulate or influence me to get out of bed, to get my clothes on and to get off to school. And, you know, I very much learned a lot of characteristics from both her and the way that she handled herself, and myself and 3 brothers growing up, but also my father too, that was in a senior leadership position in his role. Like, I learned a lot from him, but it was probably later in life that I reflected and realized the learnings, not so much at the time it was happening.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I was able to interview my son a couple years ago on my show. It's still the most popular episode. And I was very fortunate that he said about something that I did. That was the best thing that you did. When I was doing this, what you did, like not rushing to help him out at one point, not rushing to rescue him, because I had tried so many times before to rescue him. So I feel very fortunate to be able to interview my son and have him tell me that, because I know that there are some moms and some that I've interviewed whose children haven't survived using drugs, and they don't have that closure. And I feel very fortunate that I have that closure, and I'm sure your mom does too. Yeah. So about your book, why would people want to read it? What would they get out of it? What are you hoping that people walk away with, learning about themselves or about you or about fulfillment?
Yeah. In all honesty, it was really unclear when I first started writing the book what it was going to be about. The working title, like I felt drawn to write another book, and I thought I'd be writing around leadership and intuition and the intrinsic part that I feel and felt intuition has in leading a company in the 21st century. And so the working title was The Spiritual CEO. And it was 3 or 4 chapters in that I was having a conversation with Sam, the lady that helped me pull this together. I was like, this title doesn't fit anymore. And when we got to the end, what I realized is that it's a permission slip. It's a permission slip that regardless of where you're at right now in your life, regardless of what you've been through, regardless of what you've done, regardless of what shame or guilt or emotion, trauma, past experience you carry with you, it's not too late for you to have a life that you love, for you to have a life that's worth living. And the only way that we can have that is by allowing ourselves to make peace with the past and to inquire and to be curious into finding out, like, what has it brought me, not what has it cost me? I believe that every experience we have, every challenging, traumatic, adversity that we attract or we experience has a potent insight and blessing and opportunity for us for now and for the future. Yet I feel that so often we get beaten up by the world or by those around us that we shut down and we dim that light, and we never truly find out what we're capable of. And so, if people could get one thing out of the book, it's a permission slip.
I love that. I love that. What do you feel like your purpose is on life? Do you feel everybody has a purpose, and like, what's your purpose?
Man, that question caused me so much agitation for many years. I felt like, and it was almost like these influencers on social media were marketing and selling me, like, find your purpose, find your ultimate purpose, work out what you're here for. And it's a conversation that I see a lot of people having. I guess my perspective on it now is very different. And, although I believe that some people might have these grand purposes to create the next iPhone or the electric car or, feed 1 million people, I believe now that purpose can be as small as the way that you speak to someone you meet on the street. I had an experience once where I spoke to somebody at an event, and they wrote to me a bit after that and said, thank you. Like, I was considering taking my life that day, and the conversation that we had changed perspective. So your purpose doesn't have to necessarily be something that impacts, thousands or millions of people. It can be a simple conversation with someone you run into, where you just feel drawn to have a conversation, to chat to them. It could be to run your company. And I guess for me, Emily, I try to take purpose into everything I do and try to remember that what I'm doing matters. Whether it's teaching my kids lessons of life, whether it's the way that I speak to my staff or, the clients we have conversations with. But I believe purpose can be taken into everything, both macro and micro. And, some of us are destined to have bigger purposes, and some it might be to be the absolute best mother you can be, and you just never know the impact that that's going to have on you or those around you. And so I think don't sweat it. Don't stress about it. Don't look for it. Anything that's meant for you won't miss you. Just show up and work on yourself and trust that will come through in the perfect timing.
I love that. And I think also what you're saying is pay attention to who you're being while you're living life. Who is it that you're being? How are you showing up? Like, are you at the checkout line, showing love to that person or looking him in the eye and really communicating, or are you just kind of checking it off your list? I went to the grocery store, which I've done before. I try to be more present now. You never know what anyone's going through on any given day, So yeah, that's awesome.
Trying to take things so seriously. I think that, the pandemic was a fantastic accelerator for a lot of attributes of life. And I also think that there's a lot of insights to be gained. And, one thing that I've heard time and time again from friends is that they've realized how little they are in control.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to take life a little bit less seriously. There's times to be serious, but there's also a lot of times to have fun and to play and to be lighthearted and to be childlike.
Yeah. I was at the aquarium with Marshall in Baltimore this weekend, and there was a ramp. He goes, I want to tumble down it. And at first I thought, no, you can't tumble down a ramp at the aquarium. And then I said, okay. And I got a video of him tumbling down the ramp. I mean, why not? Why not say yes to that? I mean, can't hurt anybody. He's just enjoying being in the moment. So what is, this show is about creating a life that you love living. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, what's it mean to me? I feel working every day to become more present to my environment, more present to those around me. I feel it's continuously building a deeper and more insightful relationship with myself. And I also feel it's the ability to have vulnerable conversations with those that we care about.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that you answered about you said, I feel it's this, I feel it's that, I feel it's that, instead of I think. Why is that?
I guess because I've spent the last 18 years developing a relationship with my heart, and we started the episode speaking about that. My heart gives me far greater depth of my interactions with the outer world than what my brain does. Like, think about it like this. We just had Valentine's Day a couple of days ago, or it was for us over here, maybe yesterday for you guys. Did you go to your partner and say, I love you with all my head? I love you with all my brain, right? And think about when we have a feeling or an emotion come through our body, where does it come from? It comes from our heart. It comes from the center of our chest, right? Like, our heart and our ability to feel is multidimensional, as opposed to our brain can conceptualize what, 2D, 3D?
Yeah. Black and white, right, yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I was friends with a woman a few years ago. She lived around here, and we would go for a walk, and she'd point out like the energy coming from a tree, and she'd ask me how I feel about something, and I would tell her, I don't know, I know what I think. And so I have really worked a lot on naming those feelings, and I think that there's quite a few of us out there that I don't believe that I'm alone, that aren't really. There's even a book out called Permission to Feel. We sometimes can't name our feelings beyond happy or sad or glad or angry. There's so many more feelings to that. I actually have a cheat sheet for that, to sometimes just look at it, to be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm feeling. Because my whole life I've been in my head, just achieving and thinking. And I even remember my dad telling me, I mean, maybe it was just with relationships, but it was like, go with your head, not your heart, kind of thing. That's what he thought. And so I didn't really pay attention to my heart that much, which is something that I'm for sure working on now. So I love that. You didn't say creating a life you love living is making a ton of money.
Money's good too, but no.
Donjette says, be who you are and do what you believe, because those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. Thanks, Donjette. I used to work with her. She's still with the Navy. We worked together. So
Beautiful.
yeah. So you've written another book. What's the title of that?
The Path to Freedom.
Okay. What's the difference between the two?
So the first book I wrote after I exited my first company, I felt like I'd finally reached a level of success where I could kind of be seen and put it out there. So the Path to Freedom is the methodology that I've used and that we've taught our clients to use to build a profitable business that can work without them. So it's very much a blueprint, step by step, of how you go to create a company that's generating profit, that has, a purpose and a mission, and can work without you being there.
Yeah. Imagine if you, of all your 7 companies now, if everyone had to report to you, like in your first company, right? You certainly wouldn't be living a life that you love living right now.
I said to my partner the other day, I was having a debate in my head. I was like, man, I don't know whether I'm just getting lazy as I'm getting older, because I'm wanting less and less involvement with certain things. And she's like, I don't see it as lazy, I see it as efficient. She's like, you couldn't do what you do if you were more involved than what you are. But that was that part of the identity again, going, oh, like, am I really good enough to do this? Do people really want to do these things without me being involved? Do they really enjoy their roles? Like, it was my self-identity, I guess, resisting this natural flow that's happening.
Yeah. So what's a typical day for you, like someone who runs 7 companies? What's a typical day? And an author?
Every day's a bit different, but generally any day other than Tuesdays, it's getting up, it's cuddles with my partner, it's early morning surf, go to the gym, work out, read, meditate, muck around with a bit of work stuff, maybe a project that I'm working on, or having conversations. But it's pretty relaxed. Tuesdays is the day that I try to have all my major work meetings in one day, so I can kind of get up, switch my brain on, get them done, and allow others to have what they need to kind of keep things moving forwards.
That's awesome. And you still feel fulfilled, right? Your fulfillment isn't coming from being hands-on in your company working every day.
No, it's conversations with my kids. It's like surfing is something that I started about 18 months ago, when I needed to find something else to do with my time other than building businesses. And that's something that I get a lot of fulfillment, just being with the ocean, and I guess the challenge that comes from that. But yeah, it's the fulfillment comes from the smaller moments in life, the conversations with my local staff here or people down the street, versus the fulfillment of hitting a certain revenue target that never lasted that long. I'm not sure if you can relate, but it's like you work for months or years to get to a certain thing, and it's like that feeling just didn't last very long.
No. I didn't have revenue goals working for the Navy, but I had achievement goals. I achieved something, but I didn't really celebrate. I just move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah, pretty common.
It's a hyperachiever in us, not really enjoying the moment, savoring it. So it's awesome that you learned that, and I feel thankful that I'm learning it too. So tell us about, as we start to wrap this up, the clients that you work with.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different companies, but really majority of my companies support business owners. So support them from a coaching perspective, or support them from a marketing, sales, accounting, even recruitment. We do a lot of placements of virtual assistants. So majority of my companies are just supporting business owners, because I feel that entrepreneurs, business owners have the ability to change the world more so than politicians and governments. So we like to support them with everything they need. And then recently we just started up a different business here in Bali that is in the health space. So it's a blood testing facility and vitamin IV clinic. So we kind of see post-pandemic that a big issue is that a lot of people just don't know how to look after themselves from a health and nutrition perspective. And so we see that there's an opportunity there to create some better education in that space.
Mhm. I mean, why wouldn't you say, well, there's probably already somebody doing that, so I'm not going to do it? I mean, I have heard too that if you're starting a company, like if you think, well, maybe I'll start a coffee company, you say, well, look, there's all these coffee companies out there. That means that there's a demand, so you should start one, right? I mean, I don't know. How did you decide that that would be a good company to start?
Um, it's going to sound strange, but this latest business just kind of happened. Like I honestly, and this is going to make me look silly, but that's okay. Like I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I didn't even think like, oh, we're starting a medical facility in Indonesia, and I'm a foreigner. You know, I didn't think about the compliance that we'd have to have sorted out, the certification. I'm not a doctor. Um, I don't know a lot about that space, but I guess I was super passionate because I don't know, like I had a bee in my bonnet seeing the way that this whole pandemic played out. And not once did I see anything from any of the governments around educating citizens on looking after their health.
Mhm.
You know, it's like put a mask on, wash your hands, stay inside, take the vaccine. But not once did I see anyone say, like, you know, get adequate sleep, make sure you're exercising, you know, eat proper nutrition. Like it just wasn't the case. And I guess that really pissed me off. And even hearing friends or family going down that same path as well, you know, like I got COVID last week, and it's the first time in 2 years. I've been living in Bali. There's been huge amounts of cases. I wasn't vaccinated. You know, the symptoms were pretty sore for a few days, but then they subsided super quickly, and I feel actually better than before I got it. It was almost like I felt as I was going through this process, it was like my system was clearing stuff out. Like I feel energetically and physically healthier than I did beforehand.
Wow.
But again, like I eat pretty well, I exercise, I have adequate supplementation for the deficiencies in my blood. And yeah, there's other people doing it, but you're always going to attract your tribe. You know,
Yeah.
like your business, like how many coaches is there out there, and you've still got clients, and other coaches still got clients. Like
Right.
you resonate differently with other people. And I guess, as I said, this business has kind of happened, and here we are. But you know, we've been seeing huge amounts of numbers of people that are calling us because post-COVID, they're needing to get their system back in check.
Sounds like you went with your heart
Yeah,
in making that
absolutely.
decision. And one last thing, you said you wanted to talk about vulnerability being your superpower. I had a guy named Carl Sean Watkins on the show, and that's his big message. So, what do you have to say about vulnerability and how that's a superpower?
Yeah, I think there's this stigma around the masculine and men in particular that we shouldn't show vulnerability, we shouldn't show weakness, we shouldn't cry. And for me, looking back, that was what kept me stuck for a long time because I didn't feel that I could share what was really going on through fear of judgment, through fear of being isolated or, again, not kind of belonging. And there's this really crazy thing that happened as I started to go through this process of sharing what was going on and what was really going on. I actually started to attract better friends. I actually started to attract better relationships, better opportunities. And what came along with that was a deeper feeling of fulfillment because I could have real and raw conversations, not these surface level ones where like you see someone at the shop, you're like, how are you? I'm good, thanks. And then you just kind of get on with your day. And, you
Right.
know, what I started to realize is that we all are going through stuff. We've all got things that are happening, and our ability to share that and give it a voice almost allows it to clear a lot faster than us holding on or, holding guilt or shame around it. So it was something that deeply improved my relationship with my kids, with my partner, with my colleagues and employees as well. So I think there's a superpower around vulnerability, but I also think that people have resistance to sharing because they feel like they won't fit in or that they'll feel judged. But the right people you'll actually fit with better, and
Yeah.
you'll have deeper connection and relationship as a result of bonding through that vulnerability.
Yeah. And you'll start to love your life even more. We've got a Facebook user that says, health and wellness is always important. Education during and after the pandemic is essential, especially if Barry is surrounding himself with the correct people. Yep, for sure. So let's see. I'm going to show your website right here. So this is how people can find you. You have a couple Facebook groups or pages, but
Yeah,
they can
so it's the
find
easiest way. You can find the
Yeah.
socials, find access to my books, podcasts we've recorded, and I've been guest on as well.
Yeah, your podcasts have reached over 2 million people?
Yeah.
Wow. And tell us about the name of your podcast and what you talk about.
Yeah, it's called The Comeback Game. So we started initially because I wanted to help people move past this notion that, you work on yourself long enough and you won't experience problems and challenges and adversity anymore. Like, adversity and challenge is a gift and the greatest opportunity. And certainly for me, it hasn't stopped yet. I've just become a lot better at managing it and dealing with it. And so the Comeback Game was, I guess, a way to interview business owners and successful entrepreneurs and to share what their comeback story was. What was the adversity, what was the challenge that they faced that has been this turning point in their life that has allowed them to become who they are and where they are right now.
Awesome. And when people share their story, they're being vulnerable and other people can relate to them and not feel alone, right? Feel like, oh, if he can do it, if she can do it, I can do it. So thank you so much for being my guest, Barry. I really appreciated having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you too, Emily. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, I'm going to put you in the green room if you wait for a minute and we'll just say our goodbyes. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, and thank you for everybody that tuned in tonight and watched and commented, and for all of you who are going to watch the replay or listen to the podcast when I publish it. I appreciate you guys. I know it's right around dinner time over here in the US, so thank you guys for watching. Okay. And there's my overlay. I need a producer. Like I always say, I have my dog here, but she's asleep. She's my producer. So I might interview for producing jobs because Pearl's always sleeping on the floor. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you. I'm going live again tomorrow night, and I'm talking with a woman named Ramona Oliver, and we're talking about aging with incline. And I'm really looking forward to talking with her. She's got a book as well. So thank you for watching. I'm going to play my outro video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern. That's when I normally go live on Wednesdays at 7:30 Eastern. Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest.